Let's say you are like absolute dead set on this. Number one is you need to have a reason why you're the best person in the world to go and build this. Number two is you need to make a decision about whether or not this is going to be organically built, local investment built, or external private market built. Number three is I would heavily advise finding a co-founder or a co-founding team.
You are that forensic planner. You invented a tool that does crazy forensic analysis in a short amount of time and provides outputs that save the schedule, something like that. And you want to now take this idea that's working at your company or you've worked with clients on, and then transition this to a product. How do we start going down that route?
So the reason why a co-founder is so important is that serendipitous skill set. Like, why are you the best in the world to do this idea? Well, the chances are you're not, but the chances are you and two other people or one other person is, because you've got skill sets that if you were combined into a single human, you would be the best in the world. Your goal is not to build a product. Your goal is to find value.
Hi, folks. A quick one before we dive into this week's episode. Our book, The Critical Path Career, How to Advance in Construction Planning and Scheduling, is out now, and you can order it on Amazon. We'll include a link below. This is a great way to show support for the Beyond Deadlines podcast, and Greg and I have worked extremely hard taking everything we know in our 30 years of experience, plus everything we've picked up from shooting this podcast, and we've tried to pack it into an information-dense book that you can use right away. In the book, we have specific strategies on how to get a raise, how to get a promotion, and find a new job. We include 26 of the best interview questions that we have come across, in addition to 34 specific impact ideas that you can go use on your projects today. We want to thank everyone who's shown us support so far and enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah Piippo, and I'm a planning and scheduling manager.
And my name's Greg Lawton. I'm the CEO of an AI schedule management company called Nodes and Links.
As a construction scheduler, you have a couple different career options. One of them is starting your own tech company. There are loads of tech companies today, and we're going to dive in just to see how you do it. Greg, are you ready?
Let's go for it.
All right. So let's say, Greg, that you have an interesting idea, and this idea has just been burning inside of you for months and months and months, and you think you can turn this idea into a product and then go sell this product. How do you do it?
Okay, there's an enormous subject there, but what I can talk about is the practicalities. But I think really you should start with, should you do this? Because it's one of these principles when I talk to people about grass is always greener. They're like, when I'm a consultant or when I'm employed, I get paid per hour. And if I build, for example, software, I can be earning money whilst I'm not working, because you can you do it as a software as a service or something like that. The reality is that most entrepreneurs actually earn less money than they would if they were just employed. So if you add in what they're actually paying themselves as they're building the business, and then let's say they sell the business and they get an exit, most people earn less than if they just had a job and you've worked a tremendous amount more hours. So there is a question on, is this the absolute best use of your time? But let's say...
And that concludes our episode today, folks. Have a good one.
Yeah. But let's say you're like absolute dead set on this, and it is definitely a life of passion, not a life of logic. So if you are absolute dead set on this, then there's a couple of things. Number one is you need to have a reason why you're the best person in the world to go and build this. Without that reason, you will likely not raise investment. Number two is you need to make a decision about whether or not this is going to be organically built, local investment built, or external private market built. And what I mean by that, so organic built is you pay for it yourself. Local investment built is things like family and friends. You know, your business chucks in a couple of dollars, something like that. And then public markets is things like venture capitalism, which they all have different requirements as to how much money you have to earn, what's the growth weight, what's the risk profile, all of these kinds of things. So that's number 2. Number 3, now as a mediumly successful entrepreneur at the moment, I'm still going through the journey. I look at TikTok and YouTube and
I'd
my
say
God,
low.
the amount.
I'd say low to medium. You're low to medium.
Yeah, the amount of rubbish that's on there. Like, I made $1 billion by the time I was born. It's like, okay. The third thing is I would heavily advise finding a co-founder or a co-founding team, because you just cannot do everything yourself, or it is incredibly unlikely that you're going to be able to do everything yourself and stay sane.
Yeah, what's the joke? The best way to become a millionaire is to inherit $1 billion and then lose a bunch of it.
Yeah, one of those.
I want to go back to your first point, though, about why you're the best person to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I want to go back to this is because I want to unpack it a little bit, because I don't think you necessarily need to be Michael Jordan. I feel to me as though you need to have some unique characteristics or why you're well positioned to solve it. Because I don't want people to see that this is like an impossible barrier to climb. It's just more of like, why do you fit in this spot? And so maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
So to your point exactly, it's not about having the pinnacle of a singular skill set. In actuality, pinnacles of singular skill sets are actually regarded as a bad thing when you're starting a company. Because a company you have to do a lot of different things, a lot of different skills to a medium level of competence, not one thing to a great level of competence. So if you were the absolute best forensic planner in the world, I would be very nervous as an investor. What I want to know is, how do you have serendipitous skill sets? So for example, if you are a good forensic planner, so you're a senior forensic planner and you've done 10 years and you understand how US contract law works, etc., and you've taken courses on venture capitalism, so you understand the fundamentals of venture capitalism, and you've done people management, and you've owned a small company before with your brother, and you understand what company law generally is. And by the way, you've had a hand in building or deploying software before. Because if you're thinking of starting a software business that is selling to forensic planners, examine each word in that sentence. A software, okay, so you need to know how to develop software. Business, you need to know company law and finances and things. To sell, you need to be able to do some kind of sales. To forensic planners, you need to understand the problem and the life that forensic planners are living. So it's actually more about a breadth of skills than it is a depth of skill.
That makes complete sense. And the cool part is everything you named off, a person could stack up while they're working for a company. Yeah. So you could basically pick up those skills while you're being paid at a company, which is really cool. Okay, well, let's just kind of, I don't want to move past it. I think finding that kind of why and understanding, the 3 points you laid out is super, super important. But I feel like we could get stuck there for a really long time. Let's move on to a little bit of the tactical side. So you are that forensic planner. You invented a tool that does crazy forensic analysis in a short amount of time and provides outputs that save the schedule, something like that. And you want to now take this idea that's working at your company or you've worked with clients on, and then transition this to a product. How do we start going down that route?
So there's this wonderful book called The Mom Test. And if you're British, it'd be called Mum, because mother apparently in British has a U. Don't ask me why. I think that's where Americans are actually correct in that word. But the Mum Test essentially is, how do you ask questions that are non-leading that actually give you evidence of a market need? And really what you need to do, and this actually might seem counterintuitively, I don't care that you've got a product. Irrelevant, because money solves everything. What I care about is there demand in the market? And the really valuable thing you could do at that point, so let's say you've solved a problem in your company. Cool. You have evidence that one company has this problem. I'd say go out, talk to 30 companies, and validate if it is a scalable problem. So if everyone's suffering, and I mean the specifics here, I don't mean for every company it's hard to hire people. What does hard mean? what does hire mean and what does people mean? Be very specific. Oh, well, for this very specific forensic scheduling role, we only get 5 applicants and none of them have been applicable, so this project has been delayed, blah, blah, blah. Like, incredibly specific. And to be honest, that element of work, people need to, it's a skill in, one, it's a skill in itself, and 2, you need to slow down. Because when everyone thinks about starting a company or launching a product, they want to get to the product as fast as possible. And actually, what you're dealing with in startup land is resource allocation. And the only finite resource that really exists, if you're competent at financial planning and pitching, is time. Money doesn't exist because you can raise money. It's time. So if you spend 6 months building something that nobody wants, you've wasted an enormous amount of time. So what I'd say is you have to go out and validate the market demand, and you have to validate it in the most detailed way that you possibly can.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think it tees it up nicely. So let's say you go through that, you validated the market demand, and you come away thinking you have a pretty good size market here. Walk me through actually some of the numbers of what that market would actually look like. So you talk to 30 people and it seems like 16 of them are in it. What's the tipping point for you that you get that energy and that idea and that then the actual math line up to say, let's go take this to the next step?
Well, it really depends on which of those 3 models. If you're doing an organic business yourself, then really it comes down to can you hit your financial stability goal very quickly so you're able to kind of function yourself, and then does that lead you to very quickly to your abundance goal, something like this. If you're talking about venture capital, which is where the most of my experience is, it really comes down to, can you return venture returns to the investor? Your business is irrelevant and you're irrelevant. Investors are there to get a return on their money. So the question is, can you give me a return? So for example, if we were taking the projects market, the global projects market, if you include everything in construction, is about 10 trillion a year. It's about, I might be wrong in these numbers, but it's about something like 6 to 8% of global GDP. So 8% of everything humanity does every single year that's of value, aside from motherhood and parenting, because that's not included in GDP figures, is construction and projects. Within that, project management is about 10% of the costs. So you're already looking at about $1 trillion a year is spent on capital project management. And then within that, you've got specific disciplines and deviations. At the moment, the numbers are about 20 to 30 billion a year is spent on project management software. And that's specifically the Microsofts, the Oracles, the Northern Links, the Deltex, the Safrans, these kinds of ones. But that's growing rapidly. So it's really about looking at, can you get to a level of venture return within a time period and an investment that makes sense.
Let's say you've laid out those models and it seems like you can get to that return and you have some hot leads on some customers that now want to see this product in action. Let's switch gears a little bit out of the fundraising, company ideation, and let's get into now it's go time. You mentioned finding a co-founder. That seems to be extremely important. So walk me through finding a co-founder and let's say to MVP, if that makes sense.
Got it. So the reason why a co-founder is so important is that serendipitous skill set. Like, why are you the best in the world to do this idea? Well, the chances are you're not. But the chances are you and 2 other people or 1 other person is. Because you've got skill sets that if you were combined into a single human, you would be the best in the world. What you actually want to do at that point is, your goal is not to build a product. Your goal is to find value. So again, don't race to build a product. What you're trying to do is you're trying to very quickly run experiments. Now, one of the most efficient ways to run an experiment is maybe to build a tiny bit of a product. So, coming soon, register now. Like, it could be that simple as in sign-ups or something like this. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to get as much information for as little cost and time as possible. In project scheduling, that's more difficult to do. If you're in a business, it's easier to do because you don't have to go through IT and InfoSec and vendor security and all of this. But what you're really looking there is relationships and people to actually help you through opinion, because there are very, very, very few companies in our industry in the world that would engage someone without a product. And that's actually one of the reasons that our industry is so antiquated and doesn't have modern products. It's because you can't just stick an idea on GitHub and have a bunch of developers from around the world give you feedback. Like, you have to officially talk to the head of innovation and then officially write a business case. And, there's just all this gel and goo in the wheels of actually making change. Let's say then you've found a couple of people who are really, you've got your evidence and they're really passionate and can give you detail. People misunderstand what an MVP really means. There is no such thing as a minimum viable product. It's all a gauge. The original term of MVP was coined by Andreessen Horowitz, and the definition is, it was under the definition of product market fit, which is you are selling so fast your salespeople can't keep up, and you've got too much money in your bank that actually the level of money you have is being a problem. And it's like, okay, then that's really like Apple has just got there. So you wind it back. What it is there's a period of experimentation. And to me, a minimum viable product is you have gone through experimentation and you're now in scaling. So for example, would it be valuable to automate this? Well, I'll build a super quick automation and see if people care. And then based on that, if they're super excited, but it needs to API link into this thing, then you build the API. And then you're like, and also it needs to do this report. And then you build the report. And then you do that. And then suddenly usage falls off a cliff. It's not a bad thing, by the way. It's like, okay, why? And then like, we only do that once a year. Okay, well, that's not the product I need to build. So what I'm trying to say here is there's just so much iteration that you have to do in testing, which is why speed of testing and not being wedded to any single thing is actually a super important trait.
I think the other one that we hit on just a little bit, but I wanted to clarify as well too, is being able to make relationships with general contractors, subcontractors, owners. So that way, when you are in that testing phase, you mentioned a couple things like getting onto their security platform. I mean, the companies I've worked at for with Google, that can be months and months and months of getting to the point where someone can actually use your product. But if you have those relationships built up, there's a little bit of trust there and it can be a little bit easier to get going. Or you can find partners that have, lower security parameters for pilots and things like that. So one thing to probably keep in mind as you go through that mom test is to kind of figure out, who you can find to go test with. Because in that stage, if you're sitting there waiting for 3-4 months just to get in the door, I mean, that can be a real probably slowdown in the process. So let's say you nail those first couple customers and you're kind of starting to figure out a product. And you mentioned the word scale. How do you go from probably pants on fire, running around, trying to get everything done, 1 million people, get customers in, and start to turn the corner towards a more scalable solution?
So when I talk about scale, what I mean by that is the specific definition of vastly increased productivity of the founders. So the founding people with the only productivity from day one. And how do you scale that? Now, there's only 4 mechanisms of scale. Number 1 is money. You buy services. You use money to buy things or leverage things. Number 2 is people. So you hire people. People are scale because if you can manage them well, they do work for you and you can also do work, which means that you do more work than just you on your own. You have eyeballs, which is marketing scaling. And then the final one is machines, which is software code or actual engines or whatever. Like a screwdriver is automation and scale because you can scale how many screws you drill in. And really what it is about for each job that you're doing, figuring out what's the best scale mechanism. And needless to say, within that, you can actually see that there's massively changing skill sets throughout this very short introduction to entrepreneurship I've discussed. So at the start was some kind of industry knowledge. Then there's some kind of product testing, which is not common skill sets. And then there's some kind of financial modeling and market assessment, which is strategic analysis. Cool, you can do it if you've been at Bain or McKinsey or in a strategic department. It's difficult to do else. Then we've done enterprise sales and navigating those. Now we're on to hiring and people management in a scale organization. Ultimately, it'll all come down to people in some regard. Like even WhatsApp had like 50 people and there weren't 50 founders. So they hired somebody, even though it was mostly software scale. And what you're trying to do in that scale is actually find repeatable delivery of value. So if you're an eyeballs company, which is what Facebook was, like Facebook didn't monetize until it was well in the billions. You're trying to automate the production of eyeballs, really. But if which is not monetary, is what I'm trying to say. But if, for example, you're a software company, you are monetary. So what you're trying to do is automate repeatable sales, both lands and expansion of current contracts. Now you do that via good hiring, good processes, procedures, and trying to systematize and processize everything that you've done previously. So this is my opinion, but the journey of an entrepreneur is that the entrepreneur is the person who's able to spearhead understanding the skill set, which is going to be critical to the business. And then they are able to processize it to an extent. And then they're able to define, hire, and bring someone in and manage them appropriately who can actually take that professional.
That makes a ton of sense on how to view that company through the stages as it goes. So I guess a couple kind of stepping back, folks, and looking at this entire forest now instead of down in the trees. I feel like you put up a little bit of a big wall that may kind of scare people to start out with. What are some of the things that you have found going through this process with nodes and links that have been the most enjoyable and the best that you wouldn't trade for the world?
That's a very good question.
You could just keep building the wall and be like, it's not. I hate this. I don't want to do this.
No. I actually, so when entrepreneurs ask me, because I actually went through an accelerator scheme where they help you. So I didn't find my co-founder. We all joined this kind of incubator. I think in America, the one's called Y Combinator. In Europe, it's called Entrepreneur First. But they put you together with really interesting people. And I just happened to find Christos there. And we became best friends and we've been best friends ever since, but we can also work incredibly well together. Like we are uber productive working together. And that's actually one of the measures of a good founding team. What I actually tried to dissuade everyone from being a software entrepreneur, because it is a hard life. And, there's no such thing as working hours. There's no such thing as, a bed that you could fall on if things go wrong. And then at that point, if they want to do it, cool, go for it. But you're well aware. But flipping it to your point about what are the most enjoyable, the camaraderie, because you really are trying to create something. You're creating something that is entirely your own. It's almost the only thing I can like it to is when you're a kid and you're playing with Lego and connecting, you build something that's your own. Like it just has that intrinsic love and feel to it. And then the second thing is, and it really comes down to a personality trait, is I love every single day. Every day, no matter how hard it is, I wake up and I'm actually excited to go to work. But that's because my personality and my belief systems, this was the job that I was destined to do. I am not destined to be an employee in a large company. It's just not. It's just what I'm trying to say there is there's a positive and negative. Like if I was an employee in a big company, I'm a disruptive person.
Yeah, I know. I've worked with you a little bit and on this podcast. And I mean, I wouldn't want to work with you at a large company.
Rules are guidelines, Micah.
The world is built on rules, Greg. You need to follow the process. All right. Well, okay. Another one more forest question before we wrap this one up that came to my mind. You talked about things that you like and enjoy. Maybe talk a little bit about some of the classic kind of day-to-day that I think people would be interested in, and do a couple different scenarios, kind of maybe one day when you're just getting started and now one day kind of doing the scale and now one day where you're at now. I mean, you can be brief and summarized, but just a little bit just to kind of give people a flavor
Got
of what
it.
your day to
So
day
when
like.
you're
Maybe it's
getting
so far
going,
away from what you're used to. Yeah.
when you're getting going, the weirdest thing is your day's empty and no one tells you what to do. You could literally just skive a day and it doesn't matter. But in those early days, what it is there's a couple of things you can do that are such high value that you don't need to work crazy hours. It's getting those conversations and getting the evidence. Like you will obviously get into it. You'll do a lot of reading, a lot of research, but really it's about the personal relationship, setting up the calls and gathering the information that's not publicly available. Now, the faster you can get through that, the better. Very, very, very highly skilled entrepreneurs get through that faster than lower skilled entrepreneurs because they're able to pack it in. But that's number one. Then building the initial team. There's definitely a bit of building IKEA desks and, opening the garage door and doing that kind of stuff. And, the very small wins, like someone wants to trial, not even money, but someone wants to trial. It's like high fives all around. Let's have a beer. Like the success points. When you get into the scaling motion, there's actually a huge amount of reading because it's how the hell do you not just become a manager, but do you become a manager of like A grade rating? And how do you suddenly learn to manage a software business from financials, legals, people law, like all of these kinds of things. So there's a lot of reading that you have to do and a lot of education. And then after that, it becomes a process of, like I said, focusing on the super, super high value things. So I do, for example, right now, I do a lot of what's known as RevOps, which is revenue analysis. So put very simply, I try and better understand what makes great customers and what makes difficult customers difficult. And then I try and change processes so we have more great customers and less difficult customers because we'll make more money. And also, people will like us more. So you can pick these pet projects, and it's the things that are, at the absolute top of the pyramid that matter the most. And then eventually, which will be the next thing that hopefully I get to come on to, is essentially you start to be replaced. Like you actually bring in proper company management teams, as in like CEOs and CTOs and these kinds of things. And the founders go back to doing what they did right at the start, which is the thing that most people don't have the skill set to do, which is evangelizing and thinking of visions for the industry based on problem statements. So, you go to, I don't know him personally, but if you take like Sam Altman from OpenAI, how much day-to-day work do you think he's actually doing versus sitting on panels at Davos, talking and pontificating about the future? He's a brand. Now, Elon Musk definitely works hard, but he's 100% a brand. Like, people buy Teslas because they like him. It's that kind of thing. My personal one is I love what we do. I love doing these podcasts. I actually love writing my book. It's so much fun. I love speaking to people about their careers and actually just having more time to just give value to people for free, zero cost. Like that's where I'm hoping to get to in the next couple of years.
Brilliant. Well, folks, if you've enjoyed this conversation, now's the time to hit that like, subscribe button, share with your team, share with the people around you, help grow our community. Also, if you are working on a product or have an idea, don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn, DM me. I have looked at loads of technology over the years, and I'm happy just to give you a couple pointers, review it, talk it, act as a sounding board. I know that can be tough to find out there as you go on your journey. For us at Beyond Deadlines, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you on the next one.